There comes a time in every journey when the road seems blocked and the way forward is hidden by the shadows of uncertainty. You've done everything in your power, knocked on every door, climbed every hill, and still you find yourself standing at the edge of impossibility. But let me remind you of this eternal truth: God will make a way. The creator of the universe is not limited by the boundaries of human logic. Where we see a dead end, he sees a path. When the Red Sea stood before the children of Israel, there was no visible escape. But God didn't need a bridge or a boat. He parted the sea. That is the God we serve, the one who specializes in making the impossible possible. God's ways surpass human understanding. This is one of the most powerful and humbling truths we must grasp in our walk with him. As human beings, we tend to approach life with our own logic, planning, and understanding of how things should unfold. We analyze situations, weigh the pros and cons, and make decisions based on what seems right in our limited perspective. But when we are dealing with the Almighty, we are reminded that his thoughts are higher than our thoughts, and his ways are higher than our ways. His wisdom surpasses anything we can fathom, and his plans are greater than anything we can create. This is why it is crucial to learn to trust in God's sovereignty, especially when we face circumstances that make no sense to us. When we encounter difficulties in life, it's easy to become frustrated when things don't go according to our expectations. We make plans, we set goals, and we prepare ourselves for success, but often the path we expect to take is blocked or redirected in a way we didn't foresee. This is where we must lean into our faith. In these moments, we must choose to believe that even when we cannot see it, God is at work. His plan for our lives is unfolding, and even if it doesn't make sense to us in the moment, it is ultimately for our good. God sees the bigger picture that we are blind to. What may seem like a delay, a failure, or a detour could very well be a part of his divine strategy to position us for something greater. In the Bible, we find countless examples of God's ways working in ways that defy human understanding. Think of Joseph, who was sold into slavery by his own brothers. From a human perspective, this seemed like a terrible injustice, a series of unfortunate events that would end his dreams of greatness. But in God's eyes, this was the very road that would lead Joseph to his purpose. Every betrayal, every unjust accusation, and every prison sentence was a step toward the fulfillment of God's plan for his life. Joseph himself would later say, "What you meant for evil, God meant for good," Genesis 50:20. This statement reveals a profound understanding of God's ways. What seemed like an overwhelming series of setbacks was actually the very way God had prepared for Joseph to save nations from famine and bring about his divine will. Another example can be found in the story of Job. Job was a righteous man, blessed with wealth, health, and a loving family. Yet in a moment, his entire life was turned upside down. He lost everything: his wealth, his children, his health, and his reputation. The natural response would be to question why this was happening, to wonder if God had abandoned him or if he had done something wrong. But in the midst of his suffering, Job learned a critical lesson: that God's ways are not always understandable to us. His sovereignty and wisdom are beyond our comprehension. Job did not receive answers to all of his questions, but in the end, he recognized that God's ways are perfect, even when we don't see the full picture. We must understand that God's way of working is not bound by time or space. We, as human beings, are often limited by our own sense of time, expecting instant results, quick solutions, and immediate answers. But God operates in eternity. He is not limited by our human clocks. The delays we experience are not signs of divine inactivity, but part of the perfect timing of God's plan. When the time is right, he will reveal his plan in a way that is beyond our expectations. In fact, his timing is often so perfect that we can only stand in awe of how he orchestrates events, relationships, and circumstances to bring about his purposes. What may seem like a closed door today could be God protecting you from something you're not yet prepared for. What may feel like a delay could be God setting you up for a breakthrough in ways you cannot yet understand. His ways are higher than our ways, and his wisdom is beyond our comprehension. Our responsibility is not to question his methods or timing, but to trust that he knows what is best. When we place our lives in his hands, we are placing them in the hands of the one who sees the end from the beginning, the one who has a purpose for every season, and the one who is working everything together for our good. So when life doesn't make sense, when the path ahead is unclear, remember God's ways surpass human understanding. Trust in his divine wisdom, even when you cannot see the end of the journey. He knows the way, and he will guide you there. Faith activates divine intervention. Faith is the key that unlocks the door to God's miraculous intervention in our lives. Without faith, it is impossible to please God, as the Bible says in Hebrews 11:6. Faith is more than just belief. It is the full trust and confidence in the character of God, his word, and his ability to deliver on his promises. It is what activates the power of God in our lives, enabling us to experience the supernatural, the impossible, and the extraordinary. When we put our faith in God, we are giving him permission to intervene in our circumstances, to move in ways that are beyond our understanding, and to transform our lives in ways that we could never accomplish on our own. There are moments in life when we come face to face with challenges that seem insurmountable. Whether it's a financial crisis, a relational breakdown, a health issue, or a personal loss, these moments can overwhelm us and leave us feeling helpless. It is in these times, however, that our faith becomes our greatest weapon. When everything around us seems uncertain, our faith in God is the anchor that holds us steady. It is in those moments of weakness and vulnerability that God's power is most evident, and it is through faith that we activate his divine intervention. Faith doesn't mean that we have all the answers or that we understand how God will make a way. It simply means that we trust him to make a way, even when we cannot see the path. Jesus himself said that faith the size of a mustard seed is enough to move mountains, Matthew 17:20. It is not the size of our faith that matters, but the object of our faith, the power of the one in whom we trust. When we place our faith in God, we are acknowledging that he is bigger than our problems, greater than our fears, and more powerful than our circumstances. Faith is not passive, it is active. It requires us to take steps in the direction of God's promises, even when we don't know exactly how things will unfold. In the story of the woman with the issue of blood, for example, we see a powerful demonstration of faith in action. She had suffered for 12 years, enduring pain and rejection. But when she heard that Jesus was nearby, she didn't just believe he could heal her, she acted on that belief. She pressed through the crowd, believing that if she could just touch the hem of his garment, she would be healed. And in that moment, her faith activated the power of Jesus, and she was healed instantly, Mark 5:25-34. Her faith was not just a passive hope, it was a bold, courageous action that brought her miracle into reality. Similarly, when the Israelites were trapped between the Red Sea and the Egyptian army, they had no way of escaping. It was an impossible situation, and their natural response was fear. But Moses, a man of faith, instructed them to move forward, trusting that God would make a way. As they stepped into the water, God intervened and parted the Red Sea, making a dry path for them to walk through. The faith of Moses and the Israelites activated God's miraculous power, and they were delivered from their enemies. Faith does not always make sense in the natural. It often requires us to step out and take action in ways that seem impossible. But when we move in faith, God moves with us, and he makes a way where there is no way. It's important to note that faith does not mean that everything will be easy or that there won't be difficulties along the way. There will still be struggles, challenges, and moments of doubt. But faith gives us the strength to persevere through those challenges, knowing that God is working behind the scenes on our behalf. Faith is not the absence of fear. It is the decision to trust God even in the face of fear. It is the confidence that no matter how big the obstacle or how deep the valley, God is able to bring us through. The Bible tells us that without faith, we cannot please God, Hebrews 11:6. But with faith, we position ourselves to experience his divine intervention. We activate his power, his provision, and his guidance in our lives. Faith opens the door for miracles to happen. It is through faith that we receive God's grace, his favor, and his strength to overcome anything that comes our way. Faith doesn't just move us toward the solution, it moves God into action on our behalf. When we step out in faith, God responds. He makes a way where there seems to be no way. He opens doors that were previously closed, brings healing where there was sickness, and provides for our needs in ways we could never have imagined. Faith activates divine intervention, and it is through faith that we experience the fullness of God's power at work in our lives. So when you face obstacles, challenges, or impossibilities, remember your faith activates the divine. Keep believing, keep trusting, and watch as God moves mightily in your situation. Obstacles are opportunities for growth, but this truth is often hard to embrace in the midst of struggle. When we encounter difficulties, we naturally feel frustrated, discouraged, or even defeated. Obstacles can make us question our abilities, our direction, and even our faith in God. However, every challenge we face has the potential to teach us something valuable, shape our character, and position us for a greater purpose. The way we respond to obstacles often determines whether we see them as setbacks or as divine opportunities for transformation. When God allows us to face obstacles, it is never to punish us or to leave us hopeless. Instead, it is part of his divine strategy to refine us. God uses challenges to mold our character and shape us into the individuals we are meant to be. Without obstacles, we would never develop the strength, resilience, and perseverance needed to fulfill our divine purpose. It is easy to walk the path of least resistance, to take the easy road, but it is through the toughest moments that we are most refined. Just like a diamond is formed under intense pressure, our true potential is often revealed when we are faced with hardship. Throughout Scripture, we see countless examples of individuals who overcame enormous obstacles and in doing so grew in their faith, character, and understanding of God's plan for their lives. Consider the life of Joseph. His story is a powerful reminder of how obstacles can lead to unexpected blessings. Joseph was betrayed by his brothers, sold into slavery, falsely accused, and imprisoned. From a human perspective, his life seemed to be a series of crushing setbacks, each obstacle taking him further away from his dreams. However, God used each of these obstacles to prepare Joseph for his destiny. The trials Joseph endured taught him patience, wisdom, and leadership. His time in prison, far from being a waste, was a training ground where God developed his character and equipped him for the role of prime minister in Egypt. Through his faith and perseverance, Joseph eventually saw God's plan come to fruition. He went from the pit to the palace, and his story became a testament to the fact that God can use even the most difficult circumstances for his greater purpose. Obstacles can also be the very thing that forces us to look inward, to examine our hearts and minds, and to reevaluate our priorities. When life is easy, we often coast along, taking things for granted and not fully appreciating the blessings we have. However, when we face challenges, we are forced to confront what truly matters. Struggles often strip away the distractions and reveal what is essential: our faith, our relationships, our values. Obstacles push us to dig deeper into God's Word, to seek His guidance, and to strengthen our relationship with Him. In this way, challenges can act as a spiritual refiner's fire, burning away the impurities in our lives and drawing us closer to God's heart. Additionally, obstacles can teach us humility and dependence on God. It is easy to rely on our own strength and abilities when things are going well. But when we face obstacles that we cannot overcome in our own power, we are reminded of our limitations and our need for God's help. These moments drive us to our knees, to a place of prayer and surrender, where we recognize that we are not in control, but God is. Through this process, we learn to trust in God's timing, to rely on His strength, and to let go of our need to control every outcome. This dependence on God is not a weakness, rather, it is a position of strength, because it opens the door for His power to work in our lives. Another powerful aspect of obstacles is the opportunity they present to encourage others. When we face trials and come out on the other side, we become living testimonies of God's faithfulness and grace. Our struggles can inspire and uplift others who are going through similar difficulties. When we share our stories of how God helped us overcome obstacles, we give others hope that they too can appear and come through victorious. God never wastes a pain. Every struggle, every obstacle can be used as a testimony to point others toward God's goodness. Our struggles are not in vain. They are opportunities to impact others and lead them to the truth of God's provision. Obstacles also reveal the depth of our faith. It is easy to believe in God when everything is going well, but true faith is tested in the fire. The obstacles we face show whether we truly trust God to provide, to protect, and to fulfill His promises. It is during these times that our faith is stretched, refined, and made stronger. When we face obstacles with unwavering faith, we demonstrate our trust in God, knowing that He is working all things together for our good, even when we can't see the immediate outcome. In conclusion, obstacles are not simply challenges to overcome, they are opportunities to grow. They refine us, build our character, strengthen our faith, and draw us closer to God. The next time you encounter an obstacle, instead of viewing it as a setback, ask God to help you see it as an opportunity for growth. Trust that God is using every challenge to shape you into the person He created you to be. Embrace the difficulties, knowing that they are part of His divine plan, and that through them you will become stronger, wiser, and more prepared for the purpose He has for your life. God's timing is always perfect, and this is a truth we must embrace fully if we are to experience the fullness of His blessings in our lives. As human beings, we are often impatient, wanting things to happen according to our own timeline and understanding. We make plans, set goals, and envision how we want our lives to unfold, but God's timing does not always align with our own. In fact, His timing can sometimes seem delayed, confusing, or completely different from what we had expected. However, it is in trusting God's timing that we find peace, fulfillment, and the assurance that He is in control of every situation. God's perfect timing is a theme throughout Scripture. One of the most powerful examples of this can be found in the story of Abraham. When God promised Abraham that he would become the father of many nations, Abraham was already advanced in age, and his wife Sarah was barren. From a human perspective, this promise seemed impossible, and many years passed without any sign of fulfillment. Abraham and Sarah struggled with doubt and impatience, trying to fulfill God's promise on their own terms by having a child through Sarah's maidservant, Hagar. However, this attempt led to complications, as it was not part of God's perfect plan. It was only when Abraham was 100 years old and Sarah was 90 that God's promise was finally fulfilled, and they had a son, Isaac. God's timing was not delayed, it was perfect. His plan was never late, and the result was even greater than they could have imagined. When we look at our own lives, it's easy to become frustrated when things don't happen when we want them to. We set deadlines for ourselves, thinking that if something doesn't happen by a certain time, it means we failed or missed our opportunity. But God is not bound by time the way we are. He operates in eternity, and His perspective is far broader than ours. While we may see a delay as a setback, God sees it as a time of preparation. In the waiting, God is often doing a work in us that we cannot fully comprehend. He is shaping our character, deepening our faith, and preparing us for the blessings that are to come. Our impatience may cause us to rush, but God's timing is always intentional, purposeful, and perfect. Think about the life of Jesus. At the start of His ministry, He could have chosen to reveal Himself as the Messiah to the world immediately, but instead He waited for the appointed time. Throughout the Gospels, we see Jesus often say, "My time has not yet come." This was not out of a lack of urgency or desire to help others, but because He was fully submitted to the will of the Father. Jesus understood that there was a perfect time for everything, and He trusted that God's timing was better than His own. His timing culminated in the most significant event in history, His death and resurrection. If His life had been cut short, or if He had acted outside of God's perfect timing, the salvation of humanity would not have been accomplished. Jesus' life is a model for us in the way we should trust in God's timing, even when it doesn't make sense. In our own lives, we may experience seasons of waiting for a breakthrough, for healing, for provision, or for a dream to be realized. These seasons can be frustrating, especially when it seems like nothing is happening. However, it's important to remember that waiting is not wasted time. God is still at work during these periods of waiting. Just as a seed must lie dormant in the soil before it can sprout and bear fruit, God's work in our lives often requires a period of growth and preparation. The waiting period is not a time of inactivity, but a time for God to prepare us to handle the blessings He has in store for us. In the waiting, God builds our patience, teaches us to trust, and strengthens our faith. God's timing also involves His perfect knowledge of what is best for us. Sometimes we may feel that something is overdue or that we are being passed over, but God's understanding of what we need and when we need it is far more accurate than our own. He knows exactly what we can handle, and He knows when we are ready for the next step. His delays are not denials, but a testament to His wisdom. For example, God may withhold something from us in one season because we are not yet prepared to receive it. In His perfect timing, He will open the door at the right moment when we are ready to walk through it and fully embrace the blessing. We must also remember that God's timing is often about more than just our individual needs. Sometimes His timing aligns with His greater purposes, which might involve the lives of others. Our waiting may not only be for our benefit, but also for the benefit of those around us. God's plan for our lives is intricately woven into the lives of others, and His timing ensures that everything works together for good. When we trust in God's timing, we align ourselves with His larger plan, and we become part of something bigger than ourselves. In conclusion, we must learn to trust that God's timing is always perfect, even when it doesn't match our expectations or desires. Delays are not denials. Waiting is not wasting time. God's timing is purposeful, intentional, and always aligned with His perfect plan. Trust that when the time is right, He will make a way, and you will be prepared to step into the fullness of what He has prepared for you. Remember, God's timing is never late, and it is never early. It is always perfect. Trust in His timing, and you will see His plan unfold in your life in ways far beyond what you could have imagined. When we find ourselves in challenging situations, it's easy to focus on the immediate struggles and lose sight of the bigger picture. It's in these times that we must remember that God is with us through every trial and is working behind the scenes to bring about His purpose for our lives. No matter how impossible the situation may seem, God is always at work to make a way. His ways are higher than ours, and His understanding is beyond our comprehension. But we can trust that He is always working things together for our good. Even when we can't see it, God is moving on our behalf, orchestrating every detail of our lives. We must recognize that there are moments when it feels like the odds are stacked against us. We encounter roadblocks, setbacks, and situations that seem too difficult to overcome. But these are the times when we need to hold on to our faith and trust that God will indeed make a way. Throughout Scripture, we see countless stories of God intervening in seemingly impossible situations, showing His ability to move mountains and make a way where there is no way. When Moses and the Israelites were trapped between the Red Sea and the pursuing Egyptian army, it seemed like there was no escape. But God parted the Red Sea, creating a path where there was none, and led His people to safety. What seemed impossible in the natural realm was nothing for God. He made a way where there was no way. Similarly, in our own lives, we often encounter situations that feel like dead ends. We face challenges that seem insurmountable, and we are tempted to believe that there is no way out. But this is precisely when we must remind ourselves that God has the ability to make a way in the wilderness. He is not limited by our circumstances or the limitations of the world around us. Another aspect of God's ability to make a way is His provision. There are times when we feel as though we are running out of resources, whether it be time, energy, finances, or support. But God is Jehovah Jireh, the God who provides. He is able to meet every need, no matter how great or small. In the wilderness, God provided manna from heaven for the Israelites, sustaining them when there was no food in sight. When the widow in 1 Kings 17 faced a famine and was preparing to eat her last meal, God sent Elijah to her, and she experienced a supernatural provision that sustained her through the drought. God is not limited by what we see in the natural world. He has the power to provide in ways that exceed our expectations and can supply all our needs according to his riches and glory. It's also important to recognize that God doesn't make a way by removing all obstacles from our path. He doesn't always take away the difficulties we face, but he does empower us to overcome them. There may be times when God leads us through the storm rather than removing it entirely. But in those moments, he equips us with the strength, wisdom, and courage we need to endure. He walks with us every step of the way, and his presence gives us the confidence to face challenges head on. As we trust in him, he builds our faith and prepares us for greater victories. The Apostle Paul, in his letters, often spoke about the strength we receive through Christ, especially in the midst of hardship. He learned that God's grace is sufficient, even in weakness, and that God's power is made perfect in our limitations. Sometimes God's way involves shifting our mindset from focusing on the problem to focusing on his promises. When we face challenges, we often focus on the size of the problem, the limitations, and the obstacles. But we must learn to shift our focus to God's promises. He has promised that he will never leave us nor forsake us. He has promised that he will make a way for us when we trust in him. The more we focus on God's faithfulness, the more our faith grows, and the more we can see his hand at work in our lives. The moment we start to believe that God will indeed make a way is the moment that we open the door for his power to move in our situation. Finally, we must understand that God's ability to make a way is not just for our benefit, but for his glory. When God makes a way, it is a testimony to his power, his goodness, and his faithfulness. When we witness God moving in our lives, it becomes a powerful testimony that others can see and be encouraged by. Our challenges and victories are opportunities to glorify God and point others toward his goodness. When we trust in his ability to make a way, we not only experience his blessings, but also become vessels through which his glory is revealed to the world. In every circumstance, remember that God will make a way, whether it is through a miracle, a divine opportunity, or the strength to endure. God is faithful to fulfill his promises. Trust in his ability, lean on his provision, and watch as he opens doors that no one can shut. When we step into the challenges of life, it's easy to become overwhelmed by the enormity of our circumstances. We can sometimes forget that in the midst of every trial, God is refining us, preparing us, and positioning us for something greater. The challenges we face are not always just obstacles. They are opportunities for growth, development, and preparation. They are God's way of shaping us into the individuals we were always meant to be. Every difficulty that we encounter, whether big or small, has the potential to prepare us for the destiny that God has planned for us. God is a master strategist, and he uses every season, every challenge, every setback, and every difficulty to mold us into vessels that are capable of carrying the weight of his glory and fulfilling his purpose. In those moments when we feel the pressure of life, it is important to remember that God is not distant from us. He is close, walking alongside us every step of the way. The refining process is never easy, but it is necessary. Without the pressure of life's trials, we would never be shaped into the individuals capable of receiving the greatness that God has in store for us. As we walk through the process of refinement, we must remember that God's ultimate goal is not to break us, but to build us up. The trials we face are designed to remove the impurities from our lives, to shape our character, and to prepare us for the purpose that he has destined us for. Just like gold is purified through the fire, our faith and character are strengthened through life's difficulties. Without these challenges, we would never know the true depth of our strength or the extent of God's power working through us. It's in the hardest moments that we often discover just how much we can endure, how deeply we can rely on God, and how capable we are of overcoming adversity. Consider the example of David. As a young boy, he was anointed to be king, But before he could step into that role, he had to go through years of hardship and testing. He faced rejection, fear, loneliness, and danger. He was hunted by Saul, the current king, who wanted to kill him out of jealousy. But through these trials, David learned to trust God like never before. His time as a shepherd fighting lions and bears was preparation for his future battle with Goliath. The years he spent hiding in caves, away from the comforts of the palace, were part of his training to lead a nation. Through every challenge, David's faith grew, his dependence on God deepened, and his leadership abilities were sharpened. David was refined in the wilderness so that he could rule with wisdom and courage when the time came. In the same way, God allows us to go through seasons of preparation before we can step into the fullness of his promises. We may not always understand why we are going through certain struggles or why we are being held back from achieving our dreams. However, it's important to trust that God knows what he is doing. He is not punishing us, he is refining us. The process of preparation is not always glamorous or easy, but it is necessary. It strengthens our faith, teaches us perseverance, and aligns us with God's will. Sometimes the very things we see as setbacks are actually part of God's plan to position us for success in the future. It's also essential to remember that during these times of refinement, God is not abandoning us. He is refining us because he loves us. Proverbs 3:11-12 reminds us, "My son, do not despise the Lord's discipline, and do not resent his rebuke, because the Lord disciplines those he loves." He loves. God's discipline and refining process are not signs of rejection, but of his deep love for us. Just as a parent corrects a child out of love to guide them toward the right path, God allows us to go through difficulties to help us grow, mature, and step into the destiny he has for us. The trials are not the end, they are the beginning of something greater. In moments when we feel the weight of life's challenges, we must choose to view them through the lens of God's purpose. Instead of focusing on the pain or the difficulty of the moment, we must shift our perspective to see the bigger picture, the purpose that God is working out in our lives. Trials can be viewed as opportunities for promotion, not punishment. Each difficulty is a chance to grow, to become stronger, and to learn how to rely on God in a deeper way. The more we trust God through the trials, the more we are refined and equipped for the future he has prepared for us. It's important, too, to remember that the process of refinement is not a one-time event. It is ongoing throughout our lives. Every challenge we face is an opportunity for further growth and development. God's work in us is never finished until we reach our final destination, the full realization of his purpose for our lives. This means that we must be open to the process, even when it's difficult. We must be willing to embrace the challenges and allow God to work in us, knowing that he is making us more like him. In conclusion, when life presents us with challenges, we must remember that God is using those very challenges to refine us, to strengthen us, and to prepare us for what is to come. The difficulties we face are not a sign of God's absence or neglect. They are proof of his love and his commitment to our growth. As we trust in his process, we can rest assured that God is making a way through every challenge and that he is refining us to become the people he created us to be. Embrace the process, for it is leading you to something greater than you could ever imagine. In conclusion, the journey of life is filled with moments of uncertainty, challenges, and obstacles, but it is also a journey of faith, growth, and transformation. As we walk through the various seasons of life, we can rest assured that God will make a way even when it seems impossible. His perfect timing, his unwavering provision, his refining process, and his ability to make a way where there is none are all part of his loving plan for our lives. Each trial, each delay, and each moment of waiting is not a sign of abandonment, but an opportunity for God to work in us, shaping us into the individuals we were always meant to be. When we face obstacles, we must remember that God is not only present in our victories, but also in our struggles. He is refining our character, strengthening our faith, and preparing us for the fullness of his purpose. He may not always make a way in the way we expect, but he is always making a way in the best possible way for us. Just as he made a way for the Israelites through the Red Sea, just as he provided for David in the wilderness, and just as he brought his son, Jesus, through the ultimate sacrifice for our salvation, God will make a way for you in your situation. Trust in his promises, rely on his strength, and believe that his plan for your life is greater than anything you could imagine. Know that when the time is right, God will make a way, and it will be a way of blessing, victory, and purpose. Keep moving forward, even in the face of adversity, for God is always working behind the scenes, and he will never leave you nor forsake you. His faithfulness is sure, and he is always making a way for those who trust in him. So no matter the roadblocks you face or the challenges ahead, hold fast to the truth that God will make a way, and that way will lead to his glory and your good.